Thank you. Hafaday, the Committee on Health, Tourism, Historic Preservation, Land and Justice is called back to order. Today's Wednesday, December 11. The time is 1:09 p.m. Notices for this oversight hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on Tuesday, December 3rd, and again on Monday, December 9th, 2019. The notice was also published in the Guam Daily Post on Wednesday, December 4, and Friday, December 6, 2019. We have one, our subject for this oversight hearing is the Chamorro Land Trust, and I'd like to recognize the presence of my colleagues, Senator Perez, the Vice Chair of the committee, Senator Taitagui, and Senator Taitano, Kelly Marsh Taitano. So we will begin with, there are several items we will discuss, but the first one will be relative to the current litigation that the Chamorro Land Trust is in. This litigation, we had an informational briefing in October. All right, so in late September, the governor sent a letter to me suggesting changes to the Chamorro Land Trust Commission law in order to facilitate settlement. We held an informational briefing on October 18, and it was my understanding from that briefing that the Chamorro Land Trust Commission had not yet met on a proposed settlement and made a recommendation to our committee, and that they were continuing in settlement negotiations. On November 14, I read on a KUAM news release that the District Court of Guam had issued its civil minutes dated November 14, wherein they say tentative settlement agreement reached by the parties subject to legislative approval. The case is stayed and the trial date and all related deadlines vacated. Telephonic status conference to be set by separate order. Again, so they list the appearances of counsel for plaintiffs and counsel for defendants, which is Guam and Guam agencies, Michael F. Phillips, James L. Canto II, also present Pika Farron, Hai Hun, and Sophia Diaz. So I've called this hearing today because of this district court minutes that were issued that discusses that tentative settlement agreement has been reached by the parties subject to legislative approval. And I wanted to know, what do we need to know about this? And is the commission or the government of Guam seeking legislative approval? So if you could introduce, again, I see there, why don't we just introduce those parties in this who are involved in this litigation and your attorneys, and then we'll take it from there.
Good afternoon, Senator and committee members. I'm Jack Hattig. I'm the Administrative Director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission. And to my right is my attorney from the Office of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General James L. Canto.
Good afternoon, Senators. I am, as introduced, Jamie Canto for the Attorney General's Office, the Civil Litigation Division.
And you're representing?
I represent the government of Guam in the case that the Senator was just addressing, as well as Mr. Hattig as Administrative Director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
So the government of Guam is a party as well as the Director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission?
Yes.
All right. And you represent both of them?
Yes,
all
that's
right,
correct.
All right. Pika?
Hafaday, my name is Pika Farron. I'm the chairperson for the Chamorro Land Trust Committee. And the Chamorro Land Trust Commission, has attorney Mike Phillips as our attorney for the case.
Representing the commission?
Correct.
Attorney Phillips, all right. Are there any other parties in the suit that have not been mentioned yet?
No, Senator.
All right.
Actually, Madam Chair, we have Tanamanda Santos, a member of the commission, who's also here today.
Right.
I don't know if there's others that might be in the back, but I know obviously Tanamanda's here, and she's part of the commission, so technically she's a party. For purposes or for procedural purposes, the commission has authorized its chair to represent the commission through negotiations. She doesn't have final say. She will return, and she's represented to the commission. She will return with the status of negotiations and requests for their input, approval, things like that. But they have authorized her to represent the commission, at least in that limited extent.
But all the commission members are named parties in this suit.
I believe so, yes.
All right, Tanamanda, welcome. Thank you, Tijus Masi, for being here. All right, then we'll start with the Attorney General's office. If you could maybe give us an update on what is the status of this case?
Well, the status is that, as the civil minutes describe, the case has, or a tentative settlement has been reached between the parties. I should note that the entry regarding that it was subject to legislative approval is technically correct as an eventuality, but at the point at which it was expressed in that order, it was somewhat premature, because the discussion, at least by the settlement judge, was to say that it was subject to approval. And it's actually subject to more approval than just what it would eventually be by the legislature. And that's why the settlement is still tentative at this point. The parties have not signed any settlement agreement. The attorneys for the parties did sign a term sheet as to general terms. However, the settlement agreement itself is still tentative, and litigation is still pending, technically. I understand the Chamorro Land Trust Commission has already noticed a meeting for the 13th, at which there is an executive session, which is scheduled and noticed to discuss with all commission members who are named parties the state of the tentative settlement at this point.
All right, so the Chamorro Land Trust Commission's approval or review of this possible settlement is still pending, but for your clients, is it still subject to approval?
Yes, because we don't have a final settlement agreement yet. As they say, Senator, the devil is in the details, and we have a general summary of highlights of important terms. However, not all the terms necessary to crafting that settlement agreement have yet been drafted or disseminated among the parties. So there is initial approval by my clients, as well as the other parties to the case, before it would even be delivered to the legislature.
All right, so your clients, which is the government of Guam and the director of the administrator of the Chamorro Land Trust, have yet to approve of a settlement or the final details of a settlement. Have they approved of the term sheet that you said was signed?
Yes.
All right, are you able to give us a summary of what we are looking at? What is the government of Guam, I guess, going to be giving up in this settlement, or what is?
I don't know that I'm in a position to be able to spell out the exact terms of the settlement to the legislature at this point, because as I said, it's still tentative and the legislation is still pending. It could still be rejected when it's finalized by the parties. And so, unfortunately, my duty of confidentiality at this point would prevent me from really getting down into the finer details. It's something that we are eager, if it is finalized, to present to the legislature, and I can say that any eventual finalization of the settlement would require a presentation to the legislature for their possible action if they so choose.
Why is that?
Because I think what is contemplated eventually is possibly an amendment of the Chamorro Land Trust Act. But that final decision, of course, lies with yourself and your colleagues.
What type of amendment are we looking at?
I wouldn't be able to say at this point.
Are there any other implications for the government of Guam that are at play here? For example, is the government of Guam going to be liable for any cash settlement?
Hypothetically, I don't believe so. It's hard for me to answer directly and give finer details, given my statement.
If you expect all the parties to sign off on a formal agreement before the terms are transmitted to the legislature, is that your expectation?
That is my expectation. That would be the normal process.
What happens if legislative approval cannot be obtained at that point after all the parties have supposedly agreed to a settlement? It seems a little bit, and I'm not sure how that's going to work at that point.
If that's what happens, then of course that's a possibility, and we would be back at square one with litigation. I don't think any of the parties have any expectations of the legislature and understand that the legislature would view any eventuality of the settlement in their own right, and we would just hope for the best. All we could do is make recommendations, but it would be up.
What terms has the government of Guam agreed to? I guess I'm asking now as part of the government of Guam, and my colleagues here, I'm sure, want to know as well. What on behalf of the government of Guam is being represented that we would agree to? Which terms on this term sheet are we agreeing to?
Well, as I said, Senator, and with all due respect, I don't know that I'm in a position to be able to divulge those details. The commission members who collectively embody the commission as a named defendant in the case has not even been given the terms. And they are the client to Mr. Phillips, who has an ethical obligation and a duty of confidentiality to ensure that they are informed first, and they would have to waive that confidentiality to be able to give such finer details
Right.
to the
That's why
legislature.
I'm not asking them right now. I'm asking the government of Guam's attorney. Right.
I understand, and that's why I wouldn't want to compromise the commission, my co-defendants in the case, because they haven't even been given the details yet.
I see. All right, Mr. Hattick, did you want to add anything to that regards to, as the administrator of the Chamorro Land Trust, are there terms that the Chamorro Land Trust, or you as the administrator, has agreed to that you believe we should know about at this point?
Until the commission has had an opportunity to review, I don't have any further comment on the terms.
Is your position as administrator consistent with the commission's in this litigation?
We've been keeping open communication through our attorneys, and we believe that it's consistent, a united effort.
All right, and would you say, Mr. Canto, that the government of Guam's position in this litigation is consistent with the administrator and the Chamorro Land Trust commissions?
Yes.
All right. Speaker Farron, the chairperson of the commission, is there anything you'd like to add regarding the status of this case and what might be expected of the legislature in regards to settlement?
Okay, sure. I was, as Attorney Phillips mentioned, the commission authorized me to represent the commission in the settlement negotiations. For 2 days in November, maybe November 13th and 14th, I was present for, I want to say, maybe 16 hours total of these settlement negotiations where I was present. All of our Guam attorneys were present, as well as the Department of Justice and the settlement judge. Those were 16 very, very long hours where we looked back at the previous settlement offer that was on the table, and we really went back and forth a lot. As Attorney Canto mentioned, the specific terms, I have not been able to share it with my commission as of yet, but we have scheduled an executive session where we can discuss those exact terms, and that is scheduled for this Friday at 3 p.m. But what I can say about those terms is I believe that the terms that we agreed to, they are, I believe, in the best interest of the Tomorrowland Trust. I believe it preserves the program intact. And I would also say it would actually go further to actually strengthen the program, to better define the program as to what its true purpose is as a land restoration program. And as Mr. Canto did mention, the terms are specific to changes to the Tomorrowland Trust Act. And as a commission, we don't have the power to change the act. So when we look at the terms, I believe we would create a resolution supporting this tentative settlement, which we would then forward to the legislature for review and going through the whole legislative process.
All right, thank you. I notice another member of your commission is present. If you could introduce.
Yes, thank you. You want to introduce yourself? This is Mr. Joseph Cruz. He's the newly confirmed commission member. However, he served as vice chair for me for about a year and a half, and now he's just newly confirmed.
Welcome back, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for being here. All right, so it's your testimony, Pika, that you're expecting that changes to the act will be proposed in this settlement. Mr. Canto, on behalf of the government of Guam, is it just the Attorney General that will be signing on behalf of the government of Guam on this settlement, on these settlement documents?
I believe it would be the governor of Guam. I don't believe the Attorney General is a signatory.
So the governor of Guam?
Possibly.
On behalf of the government of Guam?
That's my understanding at this point, Senator.
And is it, I guess, your understanding that the Attorney General of Guam is not allowed to share with the legislature terms that the government of Guam is making in a settlement?
No, because the legislature wasn't named as a party at this point. I imagine the default was that the governor, as the chief executive of the government of Guam, was the one whom all parties and the court understood to be the proper representative in the case. In fact, the governor's council was also present during settlement negotiations.
Who are they representing? I
Sorry?
noticed on the district court's order that they list also present Hai Hyun and Sofia Diaz. And so if you're representing the government of Guam, who are they representing?
I don't know that it was mutually exclusive. I thought all of us in the room were representing the government of Guam, and in terms of myself, Mr. Hyun, and Ms. Diaz, and in addition, I'm representing the administrative director of the Chamorro Land Trust Commission.
Okay, so the governor's councils from her office are also representing the government of Guam,
Yes, during settlement.
together with the Attorney General's office in the settlement negotiations, and you expect the governor to be the one to sign off on a settlement that is currently undisclosed to the legislature.
Because, Senator, the Attorney General in that context would not represent the government of Guam as an individual in his official capacity.
Say that one more time.
Just that the Attorney General of Guam, in the context of this particular case, as government of Guam was named a defendant, the Attorney General wouldn't necessarily stand as an individual representative in his official capacity. We're only acting as the government's lawyers in this case.
All
He's
right.
not a party.
I remember this issue coming up in relative to the landfill case when it was the government of Guam that was sued and other parties within the government of Guam. And yeah, it seems, I guess, very strange to me. I mean, I agree that we need one voice when it comes to, making a final decision, perhaps. But in this case, where it may require legislative approval of some settlement, and I think we do have laws in that regard now that settlements have to be approved by the legislature, that I guess I'd like to discuss that further with the Attorney General's office, that when you're representing the government of Guam, if we are not going to be able to consult with the legislature as part of the government of Guam, it just seems, I think, different than I've seen in other cases. For example, the landfill case at certain points. Now that case changed over the years, so, but anyways, all right. So in regards to this settlement, is there anyone else who would like to discuss anything? I'm looking for what the legislature, I don't know what your timeframes are that the judge is expecting you to submit something to the legislature or get legislative approval, but I just want to be sure, if we're talking about changes to the Chamorro Land Trust Act itself, I think that's a very significant matter, something that I personally would not want to do without the consent of the people of Guam. And so for me as chairperson to get the consent of the people of Guam, I would like to get us advance notice. I'd like to be able to bring them into this discussion. I think they are entitled to know what changes are being proposed to our beloved Land Trust Act. We've gone through great extents to defend this act over many years and to get it implemented, despite many, many issues that it's been, in its path. So, I don't know, the more that you can tell us, the better at this point.
And Senator, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said, including having an eventual discussion with the Attorney General's office about who are the actual people that stand in for the government of Guam in any given case. But as to this case, I regret that it's just the stage of the proceedings that we're at that prevents me from divulging details of a tentative settlement. But of course, there will be plenty of advance notice to the legislature for the legislature to make a completely autonomous decision as to whether or which way the case will proceed.
All right, okay. Mr. Hattick, anything to add on?
No, ma'am.
Ms. Farron? Mr. Phillips?
The history of the act obviously goes back many, many decades, but even this litigation and the discussions have changed. Some of the attorneys have changed also. Mr. Orcutt's not here, and Mr. Cantor may not have been privy to some of the discussions earlier. I just want to make sure the record is correct, because two things, and I want to be candid with you, and I know, just like the other senators, each of you know me real well. In every case I've ever done for the government of Guam, and I've done many, I think that at some point I've received that pledge your entire life to the AG letter, and I've always just kind of pushed it aside, but not this case. This case, because of the fact that the governor and it was Governor Cavu and General Anderson were gracious enough to hire me, I decided, well, they're clearly the boss. So it's not my intent to say or do anything that goes against their direction. But I want that with that caveat, because there are things being said and positions being taken that I may not agree with. And in every other hearing, I stand up and say, well, that's not my position. But there is a record here that has not been reflected, that I don't think in any way, shape, or form would breach my allegiance or my duty to the Attorney General, because I believe I work under him, and so he makes those calls. But the posture of this case was actually such that the United States wanted the legislature in, if not at the very beginning, soon thereafter, for the reasons you didn't state specifically, but intimated. It's like, hey, we we have to change the law. So that just didn't happen. That's above my pay grade. And obviously, I'm neither a senator nor the governor nor the AG, so I'm not going to speculate as to why it didn't happen. But because you're talking about it, it actually was discussed. And my name was brought up because of the fact that I was one of the more vocal individuals expressing the need that when decisions are made on Guam of this magnitude, you kind of have to get together. That wasn't the final decision, but it was definitely the desire of the United States. What they didn't want is what you may, and I'm just surmising, perceive right now, that it's kind of an all or nothing. Everything's finished, we dump on you, and it's kind of like a multiple choice, true and false, yes or no. That was never the intent. It may be evolving into that, and some of you might be thinking it is evolving into that, so I'm not going to speculate, but I do want the record to reflect, and I'm not saying anything to disparage Jamie. I think he would share that if he was there, but he wasn't there. And that was actually one of the concerns expressed. So much so that when it didn't happen, they named me. They said, hey, how about Mike Phillips? What about all that stuff he was saying? And that's because there was lengthy discussion about that. And I didn't have to speak up. I wasn't a lone voice saying that we really need to be collaborative about that for this very reason, that it appears if things continue, even very positive, and I stand behind the settlement. I want to be clear about that. When it's given to you, you're like, and what part of this did we have? And without giving away any confidences, I can say I've always believed. And every single time I've watched the legislature, and I've been fortunate to probably represent more committees than maybe any other practicing attorney right now, I've seen that when you don't allow somebody part of it, and then you come and saying, this is really good, can you pass it? Your chances are really diminished. And it doesn't matter how good your idea is, if you just made a decision that you're not going to be included, then they say, well, then you pass it. And that's been one of the fears expressed. Not recently, though. So Mr. Cantor wasn't there during the couple of times that was a concern expressed. He may have read the letter and not know what it meant, but I'm not going to say that Jamie couldn't figure it out. But they did name me and say, hey, how about what Mike Phillips was saying? And that's because they had expressed that they didn't want anybody going unilaterally. They wanted everybody to, understandably, be in agreement before we go forward. Maybe even more than Team Guam, but team everybody, and say, okay, we've got an agreement here. But I think they wanted to hear you out before anything was final. They wanted to hear out the governor, definitely, and they definitely need to hear from their higher ups. And then when it looks really good, and that doesn't mean that it binds you, doesn't mean that it binds the governor or even the AG or the United States, at least we've probably done the best that we can. But I'm really not at liberty to say much more. But because that is part of the record, I wanted to make sure that that's clear, because if it comes up later and we're all sitting here and I think of everybody here, I might be the only one that was there present when that was expressed, and I don't want anybody asking how come I didn't volunteer that information when it was clear. Secondly, Senator, there was a transmission, I believe, and the transmission provided at one point or another summarized, I think, the relative positions of both parties. And I think without giving away what the final decision was, you'll be able to tell from the letters, maybe we went 3-0, or they went 3-0, or 2-1, or what the compromises were. They're generally within the boundaries that were expressed by both parties. And I can say, though, that I'm very glad of the way things went. I'm excited to get this to a point where everybody reviews it. The agreement was that we would have formal, to the extent that can be done by the United States and also the governor, and then we would move forward, and to me, at least my client, most importantly, the commission. And I think that's where we are. I haven't heard a formal approval from any of the parties, but the only party that's going to report to me, of course, is the commission. And I know they haven't had that opportunity yet. So it's possible that the executive branch and the Department of Justice and the related departments have reached that. And, I haven't been informed that I know of. I have no reason to believe, though, that there's any problem, because I think they would have raised it. I can say that, so I'm very optimistic. I'm also optimistic that the commission is going to support it, but I'm not going to speculate, and I don't want to put any undue pressure on them. I just know from speaking to them last time what their concerns were, what we presented as options, and I think Ms. Farron has done an excellent job of representing them, and collectively, I think the group did somewhere between fairly and very well in negotiations. And I think both our side and the United States would say that if they were asked, that the Team Guam came up with the better end of that deal, I think. I think everybody there would, including the judge, would say, you guys did really well.
All right. Mr. Canto, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Senator. Just, it might help the committee to put this in perspective. All that happened when we say it's a tentative settlement is that the attorneys signed something that said, we agree to recommend these terms to our clients. Now, our clients, the commission, Mr. Hattig, may still say, we don't approve of it, and then it wouldn't even be necessary to bring it to the legislature because it would be dead in its tracks at that point. That's why it's a little premature to roll this out. And I understand that the legislature is eager to see it because it requires their eventual action, possibly. And we're just as eager to present it. It's just a matter of timing at this point.
All right.
Madam Chair, our meeting is set for next Friday, is that correct? This Friday, yeah. So I expect that we'll have a decision one way or another by the end of that meeting. I anticipate
A decision by the commission is also what the government of Guam is waiting for to disclose the terms.
Yes.
All right. I was just thinking about this case I was at recently at the Superior Court. It was those gaming machines cases where the Attorney General was sitting on the opposite side of the governor rather, and the governor's counsel. But the Attorney General in that case, I believe, was representing also the government of Guam, without any person as client, as far as I recall. So yeah, I do want to get to a resolution of those types of matters, but I'm going to open it to the panel of senators if anyone has questions or comments. Senator Paris.
So I just have a question regarding should the Supreme Court take the case regarding the plebiscite, and should they overturn that case? The decision that's made here, would it affect the decision?
Well, as an attorney, I can tell you before and after, I don't think it has any real effect, but to attorneys that might be on the other side, they're going to say, of course. That is common, but in this case, from an academic point of view, from a legal point of view, if you read the case itself, it's been a while, I think it's footnote 18 tells you it doesn't apply to the Tomorrowland Trust and really shouldn't be used. But of course, we're on one side, and so when I say it's argumentative, I mean that procedurally, but I give you my word, my professional opinion is no, it doesn't. Either way, yeah. It's just, but of course, people are going to spin it, but no, it doesn't. And the resolution here, actually, Senator, is one that while we made the argument, I've made that argument. I've told people since 1992, and I can't remember anybody on Guam locally or internationally that has followed it of any stature. So senators, people like that, of course, have understood it. But judges, they just go, that's interesting, Mike. This judge, I would be less than completely straightforward if I were to say anything other than not only did she get it, I think she improved on it. And so from that point, I think, at least from the Commission's point of view, and I think the entire government of Guam, we followed that lead because she gave us a real clear path to go to succeed. And that's where we were going in the case if we didn't resolve this tentatively through settlement. So obviously, I don't think anyone would be surprised to learn that the settlement takes that into account to a large extent, which way the judge was saying she could see, these are my words, could see Guam prevailing with certain conditions, and so could I. I mean, that's exactly what we've been talking about for a very long time, and I was extremely pleased. I know a number of you were there. I was extremely pleased to see the judge in full command of the facts, the history, most importantly, the law, and letting it be known exactly how she feels in a very strong way. I think her strength and her determination encouraged both parties to do what we could to resolve this matter. The United States, likely because the motion did not go their way. In my opinion, it went our way. But the same judge, and like I said, I know some of you were there, the same judge that was ruling in our favor was saying, and you better settle. And so, you know, you can't take one and not the other and say, yeah, but this opinion is so strong. Yeah, but the person writing it is also telling you you want to settle. And she made that clear to both sides, and so has the settlement judge, and I think we've kind of taken those cues. In my experience in law, when you have a judge say you really need to settle, there's a lot going on upstairs, and it really, I'm not saying it doesn't matter what the initial opinion is, but probably the more important statement is when a judge tells you it is really in your interest to settle. That's my personal experience and professional experience, and I think we all took that as a cue to do everything we could to resolve this matter, and I believe we did.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Taitano?
Seduis Masi, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave in just a minute, so I really appreciate everybody accommodating me and letting me just provide a comment. I don't really have a question at this time, but as I've mentioned at previous public hearings that we've had with the Tomorrowland Trust, it's good to hear from people who I know deeply care about the program and the relevant issues, that they feel that this settlement is going to strengthen the program, that it keeps the purpose and the intent intact. When I had seen and heard different elements as to what was being questioned and what was perhaps a proposal to amend, I was very skeptical and I was very concerned. And I think especially at this time, there are so many issues that are still pending. There are so many fronts that it feels like, at least for me, that we're being attacked on or being assaulted in some way or another. There are so many things that we're fighting for survival of a way of life and for survival of just so many elements, indigenous language and on and on. So to hear from you that you are assessing that the program that has been defended, as was mentioned, and that we believe in deeply is being upheld, that means a lot. And so I am really glad to hear that. I look forward to seeing this progress and potentially have it get to the legislature where we too can look at it and understand what the final terms are. So thank you all for your work and for your time in coming here today to share all of this with us. And dispense a due that I have to run, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Taitano. Senator Taitakui?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and happy holidays to you if I forget to say it. So it's my favorite time of the year. Anyways, Pika, this Friday you have a meeting. I read about that. Is that going to be a closed door executive meeting?
Yes.
It will be
yes,
closed
I believe
door?
it will be, as an executive session, it will just be the commission and the attorneys involved.
Will minutes be available after that meeting, or is this going to be like a lockbox until the suit is completed?
You know, I'm sure
We have,
attorney
last time we did, we had a stenographer, so word for word, it's preserved. But then if there's action to be taken, that will be taken in public. There can't be any action taken outside. It's just a discussion of strategy and things like that. But if there is a formal vote taken or anything like that, that will be taken in public.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Haddock, because of this suit, has there been any hold on any residential leases or people looking out applicants for Chamorro Land Trust? Has there been any halt because of this suit?
Currently, right now, ma'am, the commission has authorized leases for pre-occupiers who are currently on government property. As you're aware, we're not able to remove them, so that's the only, currently right now that I'm aware of, that we've approved those, or the commission has approved those leases.
So that's the only movement that's been happening since this suit, then?
Right, and we're currently trying to
At a standstill.
go through the void cases that were issued by the Attorney General's office, and if we can
Okay.
resolve those, then we can issue leases in earnest to the waiting list.
So we're kind of waiting for this lawsuit to end, to finish, to finalize in order to move forward on other residential leases and things, or is that the case?
If I may, I don't believe that the commission has directed the agency to halt any giving issuance of leases because of this case. What the commission has directed the agency for other reasons, everything that came out last year, all of the controversy that came out, the commission said for new leases, before we get out to issue new leases for vacant properties, we need to have a standard operating procedure that the commission has approved so that we know that what's happened in the past does not happen again. We have been giving out leases for, we have not stopped giving out leases, but the leases we are giving are for those individuals who were already in the leasing process before the whole controversy with that happened last year came out. So to answer your question directly, has the commission stopped giving out leases because of the case? No.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay. And then according to, it's Magistrate Judge Curran, correct, that's overseeing this case. And you talk about that you're coming in, JV, you were talking about the settlement, and at right now, it's both attorneys who are signing off. It's still very premature. So if that's the case, then why is the judge already canceled the August, hearing? He's, it says put the case on hold and canceled the August 2020 trial date. If it is really still premature, or for a judge to do that, there's got to be more movement for him to cancel something like that. Can you comment to that? Oh, press the, yeah, thank you.
Certainly, Senator. It's nothing, the trial date is canceled because simply by virtue of the passage of time. So the case itself is stayed, everything is paused. Nothing has essentially been canceled, but the calendaring date for the trial has been, because the judge is aware, as all parties, that once a settlement agreement is generated and passed among clients, time will pass, such that if the settlement agreement is not approved and we go back into litigation mode, there would not be enough time for the parties to complete discovery and motion work before that currently scheduled August 2020 trial date.
No, that makes sense.
And just, not that it's a big deal, but Judge Curran is actually the settlement judge that was appointed by Judge Mulway, who is presiding over the case, and Her Honor appointed Magistrate Judge Curran to just deal with the settlement negotiations.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense then. And the final question I have, Madam Chair, is with the settlement that you talked about, I know you can't really speak on it so much in detail, but this settlement can be everything from funding monies. It could also incorporate properties, certain properties. And the last one, could it actually require us to change some of the laws in the Chamorro Land Trust guidelines, or, your rules and regs? Can it actually be incorporated into a settlement? Okay.
A lot of that, Senator, would not be able to happen without the legislature, and I think the parties recognize that. So the settlement itself, I believe, although I have not had reason to be expert in that law, I do remember that land, though, I've done extensive litigation and even recently, without any change to interest in land, conveyances, anything like that, can only come from the legislature. So that second element, I think that would pretty much cover the fact that there needs to be legislative approval. And when I say that, I say that with due respect, meaning that obviously the legislature will express its opinion and not just rubber stamp, but we will hopefully at that time have an opportunity to speak to everybody and express why we believe collectively and individually the strengths of the settlement and the individual provisions, as I said, without getting into any detail, that I think we all stand behind and will be able to argue, I hope convincingly, that it's in the best interest of the program. And while you're very familiar with the parameters, the question is, which way did it go, right? And I'm confident when we're able to answer those questions that you'll see. Hopefully, you agree with me that Team Guam did very well.
That's good to hear. And go ahead, Jamie.
Senator, I could say hypothetically, I don't think that anyone envisions a great increase in any expenditures. We already did talk about an eventual possible amendment of the Chamorro Land Trust Act, and I think necessarily that would require changes to the rules and regulations to answer the Senator's question, but I think primarily it anticipates just a difference in the way the program's administered. So I don't know that there are any grand changes, especially in expenditures, that the committee would have to worry about.
Okay. That's good to know. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. In regards to the litigation, those are all the questions. We are going to proceed with other parts of the Chamorro Land Trust oversight, but unless there's anything else at the attorneys, I'd like to dismiss them earlier unless there's anything else they would like to add.
I think, Senator, on is it the 18th we have the conference? Yes. I think by the 18th we'll all know a lot more with regard to, I know the commission is likely to have made a decision, and the other two represented parties, I think at that point in time, or a few more parties would likely represent to the judge where everybody stands. And so hopefully on that day and after, our posture will be able to change.
What is on the 18th?
We have a follow-up telephonic conference with the settlement judge.
Like a continued settlement?
Status,
It's just a status conference to report to the judge where the parties are at. And I could tell you nothing major has happened since the settlement negotiations concluded at this point.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes, I just want to thank the committee and Madam Chairperson for giving me the opportunity to address the senators present, and I do look forward to having a conversation about the matters that you raised.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you again to Attorney Phillips, Attorney Canto, Assistant Attorney General. Situ Sumasi. All right, now to continue. At the end of last term, the Chamorro Land Trust Commission did an in-depth assessment of the issuance of residential leases and discovered there were problems that were discovered at that time. And they worked very diligently. I remember them reporting on this, that they, on a plan, they come up with a plan that they were going to use to go forward. And the committee at that time was chaired by Senator Atta. And he also, at the end of the term, gave a briefing to the legislature as to, recommendations for the Chamorro Trust going forward. Much of it was consistent with the plan that the commission itself had come up with. And so in March of this year, I had met with the chairperson to discuss going forward with the Chamorro Trust. Were they able to proceed with their plan? And so today I would like to get an update to inform the legislature how we are proceeding. What was the plan? Are we still on the same plan? And what is your progress so far? So Ms. Pica-Ferring.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, 2018 was definitely a trying year for the trust, but I believe all of the information that came out and everything that the commission learned about how the program was being administered was absolutely necessary in order to get the Tomorrowland Trust program on the right track. So the commission, after learning a lot about how the program was administered, the commission put together a list of priorities. At the beginning of this year, we did have a change in administration. Our administrative director, who had been working within the program, I want to say maybe about 7 years, was no longer the administrative director. And then in January, the governor issued her first executive order, which basically reorganized back to how the Tomorrowland Trust Commission and agency was supposed to act, which was as a separate agency. She also provided Jack Hattig III to the commission and requested that he be confirmed as our administrative director. That was in February. So in February, when the commission confirmed him as our administrative director, we shared with the director the priorities that we had developed. So the first priority, and really stemming from the governor's first executive order, was for the director to reestablish the Tomorrowland Trust as a separate agency from the Department of Land Management. The second priority that the commission put forth was to improve the transparency of the trust, the commission, and all of the work that the trust does. The third priority was to take a step back and take a look at our land inventory and determine its the best use. There has really never been a, at least my time on the commission, a overview of the entire inventory, how many, exactly what lands were leased out, what is vacant, what is developable. So we wanted to take a look, okay, what do we have today to lease out, what is leased, et cetera. The fourth priority was to resolve the null and void leases that were a result of the Attorney General's opinion in May of 2018. The fifth priority was to prepare for leasing, and in order for the commission to really move forward with issuing new leases to individuals on our waiting list, the commission required a standard operating procedure be presented to the commission that follows the Public Law 2338 and the Tomorrowland Trust Act. The sixth priority is to generate revenue for the commission. And then the final priority would be to really take a hard look at the current rules and regulations and recommend amendments that the commission felt needed to be made in order to allow the commission and the trust to operate feasibly and be financially sound. So those were our priorities that we put forth at the beginning of this year.
All right, so how would you, if we could just go down those priorities and then we could hear about the progress on them?
Okay, sure. For reestablishing the Tomorrowland Trust as a separate agency from Department of Land Management, the trust has moved into a separate office space. I believe it was this summer. I think the director can talk more about that. And I believe trying to operate on its own 2 feet in terms of, just administrative services. Other than just hearing or seeing the new offices, I have not seen any, the commission was looking at establishing some memorandum of understanding with land management, because when we were with land management, there were services that the Tomorrowland Trust Commission was able to enjoy because we did not have those in-house services. So we requested a memorandum of understanding to understand how Department of Land Management and the Tomorrowland Trust can continue to work cooperatively. That has not been presented as of yet. I believe that the director, I guess he can speak to his progress with that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regards to the separation, we are currently still working with the Department of Land Management to provide the Memorandum of Understanding. There are a lot of complex pieces that require examination, and one of them is the administrative services that the Chair spoke about, exactly how to divvy up the cost of those administrative services and what services are going to continue under a joint arrangement. And so we're still trying to work those details out with the Director of Land Management right now. So as soon as a memorandum is available, as soon as these terms are available, then I can present them to the Commission. But currently right now, they're still in discussion with regards to the memorandum. With regards to all other aspects of the separation, the physical separation is complete. We have moved all of our assets and our personnel to a space that is adequate, and we have so far been able to continue operations without any kind of interruption. So we are currently continuing to do that as we speak.
All right, so the executive order that separated Chamorro Trust from the Department of Land Management forced you to secure your own space and pay your own director, which used to be shared with the Department of Land Management as well. Has this increased the costs for the Chamorro Trust?
Senator, I have here my program coordinator 3, who also handles administrative services. His name is Mr. Joey Cruz, and he can also speak to the cost of that separation.
Mr. Cruz, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. The cost of rent for the Chamorro Land Trust did not increase from the previous years when we were merged. The cost of personnel did increase with the recruitment of an administrative director.
All right. So, Mr. Hatzek, what are the services that you need from the Department of Land Management that you're trying to divvy up the costs?
Well, the major concerns were obviously the telecommunications and internet services. We anticipate that we would save more if we stayed together rather than we separate and get our own services for telecommunications and internet services. Another shared aspect is the attorney services, the attorney fees. We do still share one attorney from the Office of the Attorney General, and so we are paying currently for that utilization of his services jointly with the Guam Ancestral Lands Commission and the Department of Land Management. Another point of services is the survey services that the Department of Land Management has provided in the past through their survey division. We currently have 2 engineer survey techs, engineer technicians that are embedded in the Department of Land Management Survey Division, because as per their position descriptions, they must be supervised by a professional licensed surveyor, which is in Department of Land Management. So those are the number of joint services that we continue to incur with the Department of Land Management. in
All right, I
particular.
think we've discussed this before,
Yes.
and also the Department of Land Management has discussed this during their budget proceedings. These issues all came up, but so what is the delay in addressing, like, for example, divvying up the cost for telecom and internet? That seems like a simple item to
Well,
me.
again, I'll have the program coordinator who oversees that portion.
Mr. Cruz?
Ma'am, the telecommunications costs, there has been an agreement between the Chamorro Land Trust and Department of Land Management that CLTC will pay 30% of the telecommunication costs. The attorney fees will be divvied up 33%, which what the CLTC will pay 33% of the total cost of the attorney.
The attorney is an attorney from the Attorney General's office, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're not paying by the hour, you're paying their entire salary for an attorney? That's the deal with the Attorney General's office?
Yes, ma'am. Salary and benefits.
Why, do you need a full-time attorney like that?
I believe so, especially for in terms of the body to perform the function of the commission as their attorney. I think that an attorney is necessary in our situation.
Is this a cost that, all right, well, this is separate from the attorney that we just saw from the
Correct.
Attorney General's office that's representing you in a lawsuit. This attorney is representing the board pretty much in the board
Yes.
meetings or giving advice to the board? And
Yes.
you're saying that that's a full-time salary that you guys need to cover? I thought
Currently,
that,
right now, that's what we've been covering. It's a carryover from the previous budget because we were given the previous budget, and so we carried over the costs, and so
okay, so Mr. Cruz, you're saying now that you've resolved all these items yourself.
There's a verbal agreement. We're just creating the MOU.
There's an MOU?
We're in the process of creating or
Right.
finalizing one.
All right. Okay, and then, Ms. Farron, the transparency of the trust.
Sure. There was several ways that the commission believed that the transparency of the trust could be improved, that we've discussed and requested that the administrative director, take care of, look into. So that includes creating our Tomorrowland Trust website. Right now, our website is embedded in the Department of Land Management's website, so navigation to it is somewhat problematic. And actually, on top of that, my last check of it showed that we were severely out of date. So I did not see any of our updated resolutions uploaded. It seems like the last time it was updated was the beginning of this year. So that's definitely one area that we have, the commission has directed to improve. So our Tomorrowland Trust website, also to explore social media for the Land Trust. We see our brothers in the NMI, they have a similar program. They've got a Facebook page where they're able to get the news out about the meetings quicker, include more, information to get the information out to the public that isn't embedded in 100 pages of minutes from the meetings, right? Because that's kind of all we have at this point. When the commission gets the meeting minutes and approves it, that's about 100 pages of dictation from our meetings. So we were looking at having the agency look into, more modern avenues of communication that we felt that the commission and the trust would really benefit from, especially for our beneficiaries out there. We were also able to this year renew our, I want to say it's a memorandum of agreement with PBS to come into our commission meetings and record video. So they're in exchange for lease payments down to zero for them. It's like an in-kind services. So we have this MOA with them that they will come in, record our meetings, and then submit it. I believe they give us CDs of them, and the commission has asked that the CDs don't go up on a shelf, that we post them on YouTube or post them on our website so that interested individuals can go back and see the meeting, hear the meeting, and also to live stream the meetings. We've asked that can be looked into. Basically just really modernizing the way that the commission's activities get out to our beneficiaries and the public. So that's what we've asked. And we've also considered changing our meeting times. Currently, we meet at 1 p.m. the third Thursday of every month. And I know that our beneficiaries are people that have full-time jobs, and to break away from their job to attend a meeting has, I'm sure there's a lot of issues with that. So I've asked that we look into maybe moving the meeting to later in the day, to a time when our beneficiaries are more able to visit and provide public comment or so forth. So those were the avenues that we asked for the agency to take forward and come back to us and provide us with proposals or some movement in that area.
And so what is the status? Still pending after a year?
Almost a year, 10 months. I think I'll let the director answer for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
And so we've
Mr. Hack.
engaged, with the priority of transparency, we have engaged the Office of Technology Policy to find out exactly what we can do to separate our website or to create a new website. And again, we're also looking at the cost of that particular endeavor. Should it incur any costs, or should that be a part of the memorandum of agreement that we have with the Department of Land Management for internet services or for website services? So we have engaged, and we're currently trying to ascertain whether it is going to be beneficial cost for us to either go the way of creating our own website or staying with DLM in the current system that we have. We have been sending our board resolutions to the authorized, there's only one authorized person who's allowed to enter information or data onto the website, and that person is with DLM. So we've been doing that. And then we've engaged OTEC to try to get training for our personnel so that we can get our own, but we haven't received any response from OTEC on that training so far. I've designated 2 employees that will be designated for that training, and so I'm continuing to follow up with that particular agency so that we can get access, so that we can monitor that portion of the website. With regards to PBS, they are still engaged actively with us, and they are providing us with their recordings of the video recordings. We're also trying to get that transferred from video into digital so that we can upload that, because we want to accomplish. So we're trying to ascertain the cost for that, because everything obviously has a cost to it. So if we can get those recordings that are on CD, get them digitally, and I've been trying to work with, I will be working with PBS to see if they could do it, but currently they film it with their camera still, and it's not a digital recording, it's still a physical on a hard disk. So those are the things that we've been trying. Obviously, it's been a while, and we're depending on other services, but we will be providing, and we do provide a weekly report to the Commission on the status, and it is ongoing at this time currently.
All right. I remember several years ago that the website for the Chamorro Land Trust was amazingly complete, and because it had not been complete for a long time. Then all of a sudden it was complete, and then it became incomplete again. And so for me, someone very interested in the trust, trying to follow along for all those years, it was off and on.
Right.
But I feel like, yes, this website you know, I know OTEC has told us, oh, it's much more complicated than you think it is, but I still can't fathom why it would take a year. It's a year, we're in December now, right? So, and actually these things were brought up last year. That's the issue, I guess, that I'm trying to follow up. And I'm hoping, Mr. Hattick, that we are not going to look at increased costs for every item that you're talking about, because that kills the, I think, the benefit that we were supposed to see from the division, right? They were consolidated supposedly to save costs. We felt like Chamorro Trust was bearing too much of that burden, and it wasn't fair. But now it seems like if you're going to be paying in addition for everything, that's not going to work out either, because your budget is very limited. It's I know you saw no increases this year, but all right. But I agree with the chairperson that the transparency, it has to be done. Chamorro Land Trust, it has to be done. That was one of the biggest things, is that the public was discovering things last year that they had never heard before, and that's when the whole castle falls down. You know, we need to be very upfront. We need to make sure they know whatever we can let them know, the status of everything. So when do you expect this to be resolved?
We're working every day. I don't really have a timeline other than we're trying to engage with all the appropriate agencies, especially with regards to transparency.
You're trying to engage, or are you engaged?
We're engaged with them, but we're continuing to follow up is what I mean to say. I apologize.
So what is their delay? Why can't OTEC help you to set this up?
Well, you know, I will definitely, you know, I try to find out. I mean, I can engage with their director, obviously, more often. On what the status is, but we've been told that there was even problems with the website, with even putting things on the website, so they were trying to fix that. So,
the DLM website?
Right.
Is that part of the Gov Guam? Is that also part of the Gov Guam website?
I don't know whether it's part of the Gov Guam website, but just for at least for our portion, that's what I'm trying to get a handle on.
All right. If you could follow up and give us something in writing regarding that, because this is not making sense to me at this point, to be honest with you. All right, lands inventory. So number 3 on your list was lands inventory, determine the best use. This issue came up when we were discussing the hatchery, the property where the hatchery is, and that University of Guam wanted to use it, and this was one of the items that we thought University of Guam could help you with, was to get an inventory of which property can actually be used for agriculture, for example. That's one of the biggest complaints our office receives, and maybe you also, that they've been given agricultural land that's not usable for agricultural purposes, at least in their opinions. And I'm sure you have the same issues with residential. So what is the status of this lands inventory?
I guess
that was going to help you also to continue with the leases. As soon as you found the properties that were best for residential leases, that would be your priority.
Yes.
That was how you described it before.
Yes, and really the vision for this priority, to take a step back and understand what the properties were, if they were used, what their best use would be for, is so that we do not repeat the errors, what I see as errors of the past. I think it's an injustice for us to have leased out property to individuals who were eager to farm, and then they get out to their property and realize it is a terrible slope, or it's a rocky outcrop, right? Even worse, families that were ready to build a home, they can't even access the property. So this priority that we set forth was to allow the commission the broader picture to understand what the properties were, and when we do get out and lease, we are deliberate about it, and we're putting residential leases on properties that are ready to be developed. They've got access, they've got utilities in the area. We felt like the hatchery, the property that the UOG hatchery was requesting, would be the opportunity for the commission to partner with UOG and not require cash payment for the property that they were requesting, but instead to have in-kind services. So the commission put forth their directives so that the in-kind services with UOG be developed to include these services. And I mean, I see it as a lot of things can be, a lot of the information is out there, and people that know how to use the information are there at UOG, I'm sure. And even within land management, we've got GIS files, we've got all these different layers of information that I felt that the trust really just needed to get their hands on and incorporate into what we're already doing so that we can do things right and deliberate for these beneficiaries. From my understanding, and I have not been able to address it with the director at one of our commission meetings, but my understanding is that UOG has stated that that's not something that they can do for us. But I think the director can talk more about that.
Well, what the chair is, we had communications with UOG as to the in-kind services that they would be able to provide. And when we brought up best use, the university indicated that it would be a large, kind of on a grand scale, and they would not be able to provide it through an in-kind service in general. But they asked that we explore the advisor to the land trust option. So that was one that we had, there was an agreement prior where the university would have a land grant advisor to the commission. And these are folks, professors, persons at the university that would be able to, as part of a community service, as part of their recertifications and community service, they could provide these to us through the land grant advisor program. And so I look forward to discussing a little bit more. I was not here prior, so I have to research that particular program and find out what its uses and its benefits are. And so I reported that back to the commission.
Which program?
The land grant advisor to the trust program.
All right, well, this is concerning because that was the deal that was supposedly made between the trust and the UOG, and that was the basis of our approval of that transaction.
I think it was just the manner in which they would be able to provide the service.
Right, well,
that's what we're
this
trying
whole
to
thing
determine.
about land inventory has been discussed for years and years. It was always said Chamorro Land Trust was, didn't have a handle on what even was in their inventory, right? And then, but I just can't believe that the staff, I know that the staff is very capable of, they have the maps available to them of at least starting with certain areas. I think if you pose to UOG to do the entire island right now, they will say it's too big of a project. But if you prioritize for them based on your work already, that your staff already knows which properties we can begin with. They have the power, the water. You guys can assess that. You don't need university to tell you that. But and then you bring them in to tell you about the other parts of it that you're not able to assess. But I've seen it because I've been in your office and I've seen them bring down those maps and put them on top of each other to show us what's what's possible, which lands are landlocked that are in your inventory. Then those to me would be a little, you've already got those parameters laid out. Mm-hmm. Do we have at least that part as far as you could go?
Currently, right now, we're currently updating the ArcGIS through inspections because there were a lot of mislabeled properties. There were a lot of inconsistencies and discrepancies. So every day, that's what the trust staff has been doing, conducting inspections, making sure that the information is correct, the data is correct, so that when we could issue a lease, we would have that information readily available. Our staff has been slightly hampered with the operations for the dengue fever. We've had to stop our inspections and then go out and respond to the public health emergency. So those are some of the stepping stones, but we continue to provide the updated current data as far as through inspections. And
you mean updating the GIS?
Right.
But what about identifying those tracts of property that you feel are the priority for what we should consider for leases, or you should consider for leases? Because these tracts of property, I mean, I'm sure you have this, that these tracts of property have, you know, are this far from power and
Right.
water. These tracts of property, you know, have power and water immediately available. These tracts of property, all kinds of things like that, that you can categorize these to a great extent, and then we can look at University of Guam to add on to that. But in case it's slow, at least we've got that part done.
Part of the issue is correcting, like I said, we could come up with the tracts of property, but correcting the information that has been in error, it would be fruitless for us to identify these properties with errors on them. We wouldn't be able to do anything. So we're trying to identify what those errors are to fix them so that we can recommend that this particular tract, for instance, be. There are a lot of tracts that they issued on unregistered property in the past, so we're trying to fix that error. There were a lot of tracts of properties where they were not surveyed correctly. The subdivisions weren't done correctly, so we're trying to fix those particular tracts. So we're identifying many errors in terms of where these properties could occur, so that if we could get those straight, then we could offer up our analysis of, okay, these areas have power and water. We can now issue leases in these areas, for instance.
So we've got no areas right now that we're looking at that have been analyzed already.
We're currently trying to analyze them, you know, as we move forward, you know, with our daily tasks of
For example,
issuing leases. In Dedido, I know we have track 10120 and 10125.
What are you
for
doing
instance.
to get that property either analyzed as
Well,
ready
we're
to lease
conducting
out?
our
or-
monthly inspections, and so that's what we're doing in December. We're going out into these areas and we're conducting our
Are you
inspections to
talking
make
about
sure.
existing leases?
Well, maybe I can.
What do you mean by
I can-
monthly what's a monthly inspection?
We go out and we
for?
do our inspections of our
existing
properties.
leases.
Of existing leases and areas where we don't have any leases also. So it's all kind of folded because I only have 8 land agents, and so we try our best to tackle those issues, you know, as
But
they
are you
come up.
prioritizing the areas that your staff has analyzed and can tell you these are the ones that are potential leases that we can potentially lease out sooner rather than later, and so we should start with these? Do we have a list like that?
Well, currently, right now, I think that we're still trying to get a hold on those properties, on those specific areas. And so, you know, we can provide that information to you. But the database that we have currently right now on unleased, we're trying to make sure that we can make sure that that's accurate so that we can provide that information. Because so much of it was already either subdivided and leased out or not at all.
It's fair.
Sorry, if I may, I believe the director is forgetting about the land for the landless properties.
Well,
So we have a long list of properties that were given back to the given to the Tomorrowland Trust. They were land for the landless properties that were given out and then returned, right? I guess there was some bills in the previous
Yes.
legislatures, right? So what the commission did, and the staff was able to provide the commission, was a list of each of these areas where these land for the landless properties are located, and they were able to determine which properties have access, which ones have power and water, what, infrastructure. Where's the infrastructure? What properties, or how many properties? We didn't get down to the mapping yet, but what the staff was able to provide the commission was the number of properties per, I guess, tract of land that were given back from land for the landless. And they were able to tell us, okay, we have like 60 properties down in Iha, or I'm just making up these numbers.
Yes.
But those land for the landless properties were reviewed and looked at and determined to be the starting point for when we get our standard operating procedures for leasing. Those would be the properties that we would lease right away, because we already have we've reviewed it, we've looked at it. So I believe that was one effort that the staff was able to complete and report to us. But I do know that there were the last time it was brought up in a meeting, there were some issues in regards to those properties. I think
Yeah.
some of the properties that were counted were actually not supposed to be counted or something. But, the way that I really envision the trust working going forward and the issuance of leases is, as I mentioned, like identifying those properties that are ready to be developed, to build a home or to farm, and going out and doing it on a cohort basis, right? Up until just recently, or when the trust first started, everything was done in groups, right? We had big groups of beneficiaries that we brought through the leasing process, and we issued their leases all at once. And then somehow within the last 24 years, that had devolved into an individual basis. Individual land agents would service individual applicants and get them through the leasing process one by one by one. And I think that that was, I would say that probably, I know that that is a very inefficient way for us to go about this. So our vision was, okay, get us the standard operating procedures for leasing. We already have this big bank of properties that we know can be developed immediately, and let's implement the standard operating procedures with these properties. So that was our vision. We also asked within this priority for the baseline inventory determining best use, we asked that that the agency sit down with Guam Power Authority and Guam Waterworks Authority to, one, simply just obtain their shape files to get where their utilities are currently located so that we can see it within our GIS maps. And then two, to also learn from them where their future planned projects are going in so that we can also plan on our end when to lease those same properties out. And then another part of this priority that we put forth was that, we have, I want to say, hold on, let me see. I don't know, I want to say we have almost 10,000 applicants or beneficiaries under the program, and 11,000 some odd acres. So as we're going through this process to understand what our inventory is, I also asked that they look at, so that's the supply side, right? The land supply, what is our land supply that we can develop for residential and agricultural, but then also to see what the demand side was. How many of our applicants want a home? How many of them want a farm? And then to compare the two and say, okay, if we continue leasing half-acre lots for residential properties, are we going to have enough to fulfill everybody waiting in line? And if we determine that we're not going to have enough land to issue out these residential or agricultural leases, then we have to figure it out now and determine, okay, if we're not going to have enough land, how are we going to use this land to ensure that everybody on our list gets property? So that was another aspect of this priority that we've given to the agency.
And
has there been any movement other than the land for the landless review of properties that are best for residential leasing? Not to my knowledge, no.
With regards to the land for the landless, the chairwoman is correct. We are currently, DLM is reassessing the list that they did give us. So we haven't been able to issue, we would like to start issuing leases in earnest, but we haven't been able to nail down those properties with DLM yet. It's a continuing effort right now currently. And then with regards to the utilities, I did engage with Guam Power and Guam Water, and I did ask for their shape files. Only recently did I receive some kind of positive feedback that they would be willing to give us their shape files to assist us. And so that is an ongoing, obviously a very ongoing process with the utilities. They are coming to us for projects, for line improvement projects, and for improving hydrants and things of that nature. So every time they do engage with us, then we have an opportunity to begin the discussion on, are you able to put utilities into these areas, and the cost that it would be, what would the cost be, and then could you invest and then allow our lessees to hook in after they've already gone out and done the infrastructure. So we are continuing to work with DPW also on opening up the access, because this is part of the determining the best use and getting the access available. And DPW has been very, very positive this year. We have a number of great successes in reopening easements that were previously closed due to overgrown. We've done that in Paget and in Fidian, and we're trying to expand in other areas.
What are those access for? Leased properties or unleased properties?
Currently, right now, there are lessees that are on those properties, and so we're prioritizing the lessees' properties as a way to get access to those.
Well, when we heard the plans before about, we're going to look at tracts of land, we're going to prioritize these, do these as a combination of utilities, access,
Right.
everything, put the whole, list of, 20 people, the next
Right.
20 people right here in a coordinated fashion. I was very encouraged when I heard the plans, and I'm feeling a little discouraged this morning because maybe you have a lot more patience than I do, but it seems like discussions with these agencies, we should be so much farther than this. But I am glad that for the land list, that's an example of what I'm trying to say. I know that your agency has staff, they're very capable to do this, to take the chunk of land in Inarahan and say, these are leasable, we can divide them like this,
Yes.
and I've seen them do this.
And we've provided the information to the commission as
So
requested.
now you're just pending, for example, Inarahan, you're pending confirmation from DLM
Yes, ma'am.
again as to the formal transfers of
Yes.
each lot. All right. Well, when do you expect that to be done? Because
Well-
that bill was last year.
We had a temporary assignment of a land agent supervisor and a land administrator, but because of the separation, we no longer have that arrangement. So we're continuing to deal with land administration division on the land for the landless properties. They are updating us, and I met with DLM land administration last week on the land for the landless, and they said they're still in the process of finalizing the list.
All right. Okay, so there are many other things on this list. We were going down the list of priorities that was given to me by the chairperson. There were 7 big items, sub-items underneath those, but I think I can see the next item is the standard operating procedures. If those are not completed yet, that's also, leases are being held up because of that. And then recommendations to change the rules and regulations. Are these still the correct order of priority?
When we presented this, we said they are in no particular order. They are all of equal importance.
Oh.
I know it's difficult to have 7 pretty hard priorities. But to be honest, I felt like several of them could be managed and crossed off the list so that we can really focus in on the more complex ones, like the
Yes.
inventory, the SOPs, et cetera. I think what I'm hearing from you, Senator, is I think you said earlier, patience, right? Our patience is a lot longer, I guess. And I'll be completely frank with you. I have been over the last year, frankly disappointed with the progress of the trust. I was hoping that at this point in the year, within this new leadership in the agency, that we would be a lot farther along. And it really, it's very frustrating to sit at the commission meetings once a month. Sometimes we have them twice a month to really to speed up the process. And I know that I've met on several occasions on my own time with the director and another fellow, like another commissioner, to really sit down with the director and go over these priorities and kind of hope that the fire that we feel to get this program going with the vision that the commission has set, that the fire would be ignited. And I understand it's a new administration. There was definitely a learning curve. My understanding of the program, I did not learn in a month or 2 months. It took a lot, and so there's definitely the learning curve. But I'll be frank, I've been consistently disappointed and frustrated, to be honest.
Mr. Hattick, do you have different priorities than what the commission has laid out here?
Well, we have other priorities that were laid out as part of the litigation is one, and there were other secondary priorities. But since meeting with the chairwoman, I've made it, I think, a considerable effort to make sure that we are able to address each of these priorities, and the time spent trying to provide the commission with the information that it does request. Insofar as the separation is concerned, insofar as having to stop operations for dengue, insofar as trying to continue the work that my predecessors have gotten started, I think that we have made some significant progress. I know that it's not probably to the satisfaction of everybody, but I am confident that with the staff currently that we have, we would be able to accomplish more. We will continue to work hard for these priorities. I know that, for instance, of the null and voids, we have taken care of 17 of these cases, so we're down to 85. So we really, I think, it's just a painstaking and arduous task right now, not knowing, the federal litigation, where it's going to go, and all these other things. But I think the staff has been very, very diligent, and we've been trying very, very hard to meet these priorities. And we will continue to work with the commission and the chairwoman to ensure that these priorities are addressed. And I'm pretty sure that we will make some headway in the coming year in 2020, because we're now going to press hard on the people that we need, because it's a cooperative effort. It's not just the staff that does the job. We also cooperate with other agencies that have other resources that are able to help us, train us, and help train us better. Department of Agriculture has been a really good example of that. Their willingness to come in and meet with us and train us for the needs of our agricultural farmers. So these are things that I look forward to in the new year, and I look forward to a renewed effort, with the commissioners and the chairwoman, so that we can make the priorities a reality.
All right, just a couple of things that I'm hearing. First of all, I think the staff has always proven to be very capable. When the commission when the news was, things were bad, all kinds of discoveries of kind of doing things the wrong way were discovered. There was a recommitment to let's do this all in a standard way, so that we cannot be accused of being unfair, biased, and especially directors, right, being accused of this, or any staff member, and that's very important. It's the trust of the people that we really, really need right now. And there's so many things that the trust can do. I think this list is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other things that we could do, we want to do, that it was envisioned that this trust would do, but we can't get anywhere with these standard things being done. We need to know where the land is. We need to know what the operating procedures are. But for example, if you're working case by case with farmers, the Department of Ag, I feel like that's kind of a different priority. It's a great idea, but a different priority perhaps than getting the standard operating procedures out of the way, so that we can deal with all the farmers as soon as possible.
I just wanted to say that we did submit a draft of the standard operating procedure, and it is currently being reviewed by the commission. So I know it took us a while for us to finally make it, on concrete paper. Well, we took the current rules and regulations and the current law, and we did provide the commission with it, and we should be reviewing it again, very soon at the commission's discretion.
All right, well, I'm gonna stop my line of questioning on this part. There were 7 items. We stopped at the land inventory. They're still on the list, resolving the null and void. You gave us a quick update on that. Prepare for leasing, the standard operating procedures, generate revenue. That's another topic I wanted to discuss. And the recommend current rules and regs amendments. I think that's complex because to do that is a lengthy process. I'm not sure if you need that in order to really implement the rest of these things. But I would like to see some progress. But I'm going to just take a pause on myself right now and see if the other senators have anything to discuss regarding these priorities and the status updates on these priorities. Senator Perez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for everyone for being here today. I think, challenges are opportunities. And in looking at the struggles that you guys face, I think it really speaks to the fact that, within government of Guam, there's so much knowledge, and yet we cannot seem to work together. And, thinking about your priority number 2, improving transparency and getting, your meetings accessible to the public. I mean, if you look at here, if I could offer the services of the legislature, I think this is, if you look around the different agencies, they're really, models within Gov Guam. And maybe even, looking to these other agencies, maybe if OTEC is not forthcoming, is there a way to look at these other model agencies or model parts of government that are doing it well, and that can do it pretty effectively. I would probably suggest that. And the streamlining, I mean, if you look at the streamlining, it's really effective. And I don't know if CDs, that's, becoming, it just seems more work. If you can, get that streamlined. If PBS maybe has the expertise in that, that would be great to look at those other new technologies out there. And regarding, best use, I think it's really important to bring in other agencies. So like BSP, I think that they have an understanding of land use, and they are looking towards really kind of creating things more holistically. And I think it's good to bring them in the discussions of best use. As well, so within UOG, WERI, they have the capacity to do a lot of the overlays with the different, how they can analyze resources. So I think it's also, I would suggest, keeping in mind conservation, as far as best use, in addition to how the beneficiary can use that land, but looking at from a lens from environmental conservation, I think would be a good look. I would also recommend soil and water conservation districts. They may have the actual inventory or the resources that you're looking for. So engaging other partners within Guam and Guam EPA. So they are, they're looking at land use in a way that can protect the aquifer. So I think, bringing them into the discussion, Brian Bearden, he is a good contact. And then USDA has stewardship programs. So potentially, integrating stewardship with leases, I think would be a great way to go. And in terms of, as the population grows, is there going to be enough inventory, right? And, I think the way about that is looking at mixed-use developments. I know we had this discussion before. And, I think, maybe maximizing that approach because it provides housing, it provides potential economic development, a source of income, and you're not losing or you're not giving up more land, you're using the same property, but in a continual, sustainable fashion. So I really would like to encourage that in more urbanized areas, and that would help solve the issue with regards to infrastructure problems in lands that are harder to develop. With regard to the SOP, what public law was that requires that? Can you?
23-38.
23-38.
The SOP, I'm sorry if I may, the SOP is not required by law, but the commission had never really seen a standard operating procedure for how the agency administers leasing, and that's in line with the law.
Okay. Are the public allowed to provide input on that?
Yes, I believe, as the director mentioned, I think it was in October, at our October meeting, the commission was provided a draft standard operating procedure. I'm very hesitant to call it a draft standard operating procedure. It was a PowerPoint presentation. However, since then, I think perhaps that was the easiest way for the director to kind of get it all out on paper. So it was a starting point. At the November meeting, I was able to describe the changes that the commission felt needed to happen to turn that information into actual standard operating procedures. The director was not at that commission meeting, but I'm sure that his staff apprised him of what the commission's looking for. What the commission is really looking for these standard operating procedures are internal standard operating procedures, and I guess to match those standard operating procedures, there would be, I guess, what we're calling consumer guides. So information, I guess, booklets or brochures that help our beneficiaries, our applicants, our leaseholders understand what the process is, what's required of them, what the agency will do once they fulfill their duties, and how, I guess, it would be broken down by process. So there's the application process, then there's what to do if you're on our waiting list, there's what to do when you've been selected for a lease, and then there's also, if you do have a lease, this is the information you should know moving forward. So I believe at our December 19th meeting, we have a meeting next week, right? Next Thursday. So I'm hoping to see a real first draft of a couple of those standard operating procedures and consumer guides.
Great. The other thing regarding Tomorrowland Trust, I know this is on one of your priorities, but as far as how to ensure that you're getting enough revenues to pay for the operations, I know this is something that is on your list, and potentially even paying for utility connections. Is this how far have you gone in that regard?
So there were properties that were identified for commercial leasing and licensing that have basically gone through the whole process, and I guess are now sitting waiting to be leased out for commercial uses. So we have engaged with Guam Economic Development Agency, GEDA, and we have a signed MOU with them. We're partnering with them, and they would be issuing out requests for proposals, I believe, for 3 of these properties. That's currently in the works. I don't know.
It's on the agenda for Thursday's meeting.
Okay, it's on the agenda for next week's meeting. There's also a list of commercial leases or licenses that have been issued in the past that their expiration dates are coming up. And so I believe that's also on our agenda. We looked at it several months ago and asked the agency, okay, what are our next steps? Because once those leases expire, that's revenue that we've been counting on that we no longer will have. So I've asked that that the agency propose our next steps for the commission, and also get legal counsel's advice now that our commercial rules and regs are promulgated. because these leases predate those commercial rules and regs. So,
Has GITA been able to provide some financial assistance in regards to sustainability for the agency? As far as, making sure that the revenues coming in are going to pay for the needs of the agency?
I don't think that they were looking at it in terms of operations, revenue for operations, but what they have provided are, I guess, potential revenues we can see from, I think, three properties that we asked them to issue out requests for proposals for. So they've been able to tell us how much money we may be able to earn for leasing those properties.
And is that something the commission is open to doing as far as expanding their involvement in looking at the long term of CLTC as far as financially stable or sustainable?
I would say from where I sit on the commission, we can use all the help we can get, and if that's something that they can help us with, I'd say please help us.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Taisigui.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the infrastructure, does Chamorro Land Trust have a infrastructure fund account?
We provide a quarterly, I believe it's monthly. We provide a monthly status of all the accounts, all the funds to the government and the legislature as well. And we do have the current, very current figures right now.
Okay, can you tell me how much is in this particular fund, the infrastructure fund?
I think Mr. Cruz can best tell you that number. He's the one that works on our books and really keeps a handle on all things related to the land trust.
Financials.
Yeah.
Okay.
As of year-end, September 30, 2019, the CLTC Survey and Infrastructure Fund collected a total of $273,680.10. Although that's not what's recorded in the books. For the last 2 years, I believe, and I didn't bring the printout of the AS400, but all our revenue has been recorded in our books as a due from the general fund. So in the bank, we have roughly maybe, I want to say like $5,000 only. And the rest is a receivable from the general fund.
So this infrastructure fund that's placed into this, supposed to be on your books, is showing $273,000. However, when you look into the account, there's only $5,000.
The $273,000 was revenue generated for fiscal year 2019, but
So where's the money?
it's recorded as a receivable in our general ledger as a receivable from the general fund.
Yeah, please.
All right, Mr. Cruz, in 2017, the fund accumulated $354,348, but $321,263 was transferred out. So in April 2019, Mr. Hattick, the director, wrote to the governor requesting that funds transferred out in 2017 be restored. What was the response to this request?
I have yet to receive any official response from the Department of Administration.
All right, so since that 2017 transfer, there continue to be, the money's just simply not being
Remitted
put into that account now.
Right.
into our bank account, yes.
Right.
All right.
What I
Could
believe-
you send us an accounting of that, and I would send it to.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Now,
Thank you
this
so-
fund is supposed to be used for surveying, obviously, and infrastructure, which has been one of the prevailing issues again for the land trust. And it was just created in 2015. It was established, this fund. All right.
Yeah, and that was my next question. It is established, thank you so much for that. And I appreciate the information, to follow up. And Jack, I hope you do follow up with this funding to
ma'am.
be placed back. I see there was a bunch of transfer authority given to the transfers made by the governor, to certain agencies, I hope that your department receives some of that money too.
I did follow up, Senator, in August of this year. I followed up on it, and I will follow up again, obviously.
Are you are you on that list of agencies that receive some money through the Governor's Transfer Authority?
I
I think she's
I'm
talking
not-
about the list that came out today.
No.
The list that came,
I didn't see the Chamorro
No.
Trust on that.
Okay, well, you might want to bring that up. Okay.
Yes,
Because this is really something, water, power, utilities, the people who receive some of these properties are really they don't have the means to pump out $8,000 to hook up water or power. And speaking of power, you were talking about the GIS mapping, and my good colleague was mentioning BSP as one of the agencies, but have you had the opportunity to speak with GPA? Because GPA has extensive mapping of on a GIS perspective on areas that provide power to certain places. And you were talking about you're trying to put something together, but have you spoken to GPA?
Yes, ma'am. We did have a conversation, and we did request for the GIS, their GIS layers to share information. I also asked them what their expansion plans were, and they indicated that they did not have any expansion plans at this point, and it was partly and parcel to whether they could get a good customer base, and that's what their expansion would be. So just recently, through another request for GPA through the Land Trust, we were able to get some positive feedback, and we're hoping to get those GIS layers before the end of the year so that we can help plot, and this goes to the best use question that was asked earlier.
Right.
So we have been, critically engaged with them, and we are hoping they're going to give us that information very soon so that we could proceed with the planning, and we can present to the commission, at least for the power. For water, it is they are doing a lot of improvements on their lines right now. So we're using that current information right now where they're at, and I'm still communicating with GWA to provide that information so that we could get some water, and maybe they could drop a dime in the bucket and use their their resources or their bond money to put the infrastructure in, and then our lessees can hook in for a much smaller fraction of the cost. But to put the line in to have our lessee be responsible for that at this point is really tough. It's difficult.
Okay. Well, I'm thank you if you continue to be engaged with them, because I know their mapping system is very up to date, and 11,000 acres is what you said that you have, and that's quite a bit of acreage. And how many employees do you have, Mr. Hadjic, that have the authority to go out and look at properties?
Currently, we have 8 land agents.
Okay, and of this, when they go out, I'm certain that there's rules and regulations on what kind of building standards and homes that are built on these properties, and you do have that. You mentioned SOPs, correct? And do you have one on the type of infrastructure that these residents can build on Chamorro Land Trust?
Currently, right now, all residents, according to their lease agreement, have to conform to the code, to the building code. And so that's our guide as to what types of structures that they're allowed to build on land trust property.
And you go out periodically, daily, to check on these properties?
We do our best, yes, we do our best to do that. We have compliance checks that we already have instituted currently going on right now. And then what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a look at, everybody should get one look annually at least. If you're in compliance, then we should come out to visit you at least once during the year. If you're not in compliance, then we need to put you on a pathway to compliance. Okay. And so we're developing that as part of the standard operating procedure.
What about the areas that are not, no one is staying on right now? It's considered vacant, and there are a lot of trash dumping going on. And how do you deal with that when you find that there's Chamorro land that's actually been used as someone's dumping ground? How do you go about?
Well, we do our best to ascertain who may be responsible. If there's a current lease on the property, then we would contact the leaseholder. If the property is not currently being leased out, then we engage with Guam EPA to determine exactly the situation, what it is, and we also work with our mayors and DPW to try to see if we can get the resources, because the trust or the agency itself doesn't have the resources to remove all of that. So we have to work with our partner agencies to try to get those resolved, those issues resolved.
Okay. I hear it's a big problem, actually. One of the big problems that you have on these vacant lots that are happening. I think just a last question on this. The Girl Scouts located across the street from Chief Brody, is that Tomorrowland Trust?
I think I'd have to get back to you, Senator, on that. I'm not entirely sure that
That's in your inventory?
that's in my inventory. I know there is a portion of closer to where Kmart is that is a part of our inventory jointly with DICID and, yeah, but I'm not
The
entirely sure
Goodwill,
about that
it
one.
used to be the old Goodwill?
Used to be the old Goodwill,
Okay, that
correct.
is under Chamorro Trust. So part of it is, so I'm looking, okay, let me know, Jack, who has the property on Girl Scouts, okay?
Okay,
Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Other than that, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing that list of accounts as well. Thank you.
Could you just update us on, you said there are 10,000 applicants still pending. Of the 10,000, how many of those are from the 1995 list?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm working off of 2018 numbers. I believe those are the most recent numbers that I have. Total applications we have are 11,000 in September 2018. So this is a bit old, but does the director have any updated numbers, or Joey?
Right
No.
now,
Okay.
we're ascertaining that approximately 8,000 of those may be, but that's just a ballpark
waiting.
From
figure.
1995.
From 1995.
So, oh, from 1995.
Right.
I'm sorry.
So I've heard that
Total
number.
applications from 1995. I know that number. 7,121.
Okay.
And total leases are 2,415.
So there are only 5,000 pending?
Yeah, 47.
Okay.
4706.
Yes, that's correct.
The number pending has changed though, because we have been leasing out since
Right.
these numbers were produced last year.
And we have more and more applicants also coming in every day and requesting for, so.
But not the 95. 95 is
Because
set.
95, you have promised that will be our priority.
Yes.
Is to clear
Yes.
this 95 list. And so,
Yes.
yeah, and so,
So 4,706
okay.
applicants don't have a lease, but I think that number is lower today.
All right, so I've seen that the commission is actually very regular with their meetings. I think it's rare that it's canceled or postponed. I see you guys meet sometimes twice a month. So I know that you're meeting often, and I've seen on the minutes that you address in your meetings from these big issues that we're talking about today, the overall plans for the agency and progress. You also address in your meetings case-by-case cases of individuals that have come to the agency with complaints and different items that need commission action. And so I've seen that, and I know that from the minutes, I can tell that the staff gives a report to the commission, so they're doing work even prior to the meetings. They're giving you an update, and then you're able to act. And so it looks like for individuals, there's a lot of individual work going on. But I am very concerned about the big picture work here. I want to see what we can, accomplish in 1 year. For example, 2020 is coming up, like you said, Mr. Hattie. We've got 1 year. Let's see what, I'd like to see maybe a more refined list of what we can accomplish in 2020. And that's why I'm thinking if you can prioritize the tracks that your staff already knows about, that these are the most likely pieces of property to take care of any side issues, then let's make a list. And I don't know, I would like to ask for, I mean, you answer to the commission is independent, but I would just like to be able to give the public a sense of, from almost disaster to where can we go in 2020, and then these other things will remain on your long-term, we have to resolve the infrastructure fund. Without infrastructure, we're going nowhere. We're going to keep going in circles. And I want to help you with those types of things, but I want the public to be sure while we're working on those types of things that we've got some tracts of land, that we're able to accomplish everything that we need and get those leased out as soon as possible. And the other individual work, the compliance work, I know EPA, they've been in here saying we should all be looking to Chamorro Land Trust to put up fences, which is a whole other project, right, to prevent illegal dumping on Chamorro Land Trust land. Those items, to me, I mean, they're a priority, but they cannot be a priority above, the standard operating procedure for leases. You've got their lease mission has got to be fulfilled. We've got to get that rolling. We've got to make sure that's fair. That's really what I'm looking for here. That's why we're having an oversight, is because of the bad publicity that Chamorro Land Trust got, looking unfair. I know that there have been many explanations as to what really happened, so that's all we want. I want an assurance that your procedures are in place. It can never happen again. That promise. I want that fulfilled, like in a month, hopefully. You know what I mean? As soon as possible, fulfill that promise that those things can never happen again. That type of departing from, standard procedure can't happen. And leases can happen, that they can happen, and that we can do this, and we can do this the right way, and we can do this efficiently. We can do it in groups. We can pick the best properties to do this on immediately, and then put all those other properties on a longer term. Maybe we can't accomplish them in 2020, but I like to think so, right? But
Yes.
But please, let's just get something very concrete that we can accomplish 2020. I always worry that we are going to lose commissioners, and then we're going to lose all that momentum. We have a very good commission. They have momentum, and they're dedicated, because not all commissions are going to put in the hours and hours that these have to resolve and really figure out what the problems were. And I want to commend the staff. They did all the work. I don't want it to go to waste. They did all the work to tell us what the issues were, how they got like that, and I know they know how to solve them, and it's just really a matter. It's sad to me that breaking up Department of Land Management and the Land Trust and the ancestral lands has actually created issues that, are getting in your way. And it's because they have become dependent on each other, for simple things like recording the meetings, getting the minutes up on the website, things like this. And so I'm just hoping that we don't have to create a whole new bureaucracy to get things like that done, that you could please, be as resourceful as possible, frugal as possible, and let's try to get those things done. I am totally open to any recommendations that we could help you with. Of course, I know we are dealing with a lawsuit, so that's another big elephant in the room. I wanted to talk about the commercial leases, but I'm thinking I'm going to put those on hold. I've read in your minutes that you are following up with commercial leases. You're getting reports on commercial leases as to whether they're up to date with my concern is those that expire, they get extended versus getting rebid out, right? Are you getting what you should be getting for those types of properties? Things like that. I'm thinking I'm going to look again at the reports for the commercial leases, look to the commission if they could update me on commercial leases. There was, I think one of the properties that is on your commercial lease list that I also want to talk about is Oka Point. Mm-hmm. And I remember at one of the hearings I was at before I was a senator, one of the descendants of the person, the man who donated that property, and I think either he or his son just passed away recently, but it was a Paris family. They donated this property to the government of Guam to build a hospital. And it was very clear at that hearing I was at that was going to be the purpose of donating that property to the government of Guam. Eventually, it got put into the land trust inventory, and now we, I think, put it on a commercial lease, and it may end up that it won't be used for those purposes, but I think we need to discuss this with this family, and that's one of the things I would like to do eventually. Okay, and we, you know, we're having hospital discussions, so I think we need to resolve that. I don't want any of these families that have donated land to the government of Guam for particular purposes to think, you know, to feel that way, that we have taken the property and done something totally different with it. But hopefully we can discuss this with them. Yes.
Just 1 second. I was looking for something. So, you know, Jack, to put up a website, I mean, transparency is really big, especially for the people out there who are understanding more about Chamorro Land Trust and all those rumors. Don't make it rumor, make it fact. And to put it on the website would be great. And it would cost like only $3,000 a year to put up a website that you can put a minimal amount of, and I'm pretty sure there's some, at least, and I'm looking to you, the money man, at least $3,000. Don't wait for, you know, Office of Technology to help you at this point. Why don't you just put one up right now? It's only $3,000 a year, okay? And that would start the beginning of something. And then if OT, you know, later on comes in for something bigger and better. But just wanted to, I got the information now, so, okay. Thank you, Ms.
I know that in discussions with the Department of Land Management, they are facing similar issues. In fact, we tried to get on their website today, not possible. It's not, we're not even, so the agencies are having issues with each other, I think, at this point. Technology is one of the issues, but, and I know we even have proprietary issues. Like, for example, maps, right? This is why I love the Chamorro Land Trust, because I know they have all this capability for maps, land management also, and then Bureau of Statistics and Plans, like Senator Perez has said. With all this mapping capability, we should know everything at our fingertips. We really should, and I know it's possible. You know, you've actually done it, but now we're kind of in a situation where things are not smooth. They're not. They've been divided up too much that we can't get the information that we used to be able to access. Even Department of Land Management's having this issue. But again, so if we could just focus on what the priorities are going to be, what we are going to accomplish 2020, so we can see whether this is a successful year or not for the trust. And I think building the trust of the people is really first and foremost. So if we could just make sure that what we are doing with leases is what we promised we were going to do with leases. That's the first thing I want to see. Compliance might have to take a little bit of a back seat to that. Let's get that plan rolling, and then it hopefully can move by itself a little bit more. But anyways, I'm going to trust that to you to work that out and get back to us, just so we can have a gauge. I appreciate that. And again, I appreciate all your time, and I'm going to spare you all the rest of my questions at this point. But Mr. Cruz, thank you so much for keeping the financials straight for us and keeping us informed. And please, if you could send us a report about those funds, that's very helpful to us. Mr. Hattick, if I can help you to get this money, I mean, we'll see what we can do. And if there's a way, if your council can recommend to you a way that you think we can restructure the language of that particular fund so that this cannot happen, please send that recommendation.
Actually, we've already made recommendations to the commission, so the commission is in receipt of those recommendations.
Perfect.
And
Thank
we're
you.
attempting to, hopefully by the 19th, we can address them.
All right, let's tighten that up then. And again, to the commission members, Idus Masi, for all your work. I know it's spent hours per meeting. It goes from like 1 to 5, your meetings, every month at least, if not twice a month. So thanks again for all the work that you've done, Mr. Cruz, Saina Santos, and of course, Chairperson Pika. I know that you've put in many, many hours for this. So Idus Masi. Thanks again to the staff of Chamorro Land Trust who are here. And I know dealing with many, many challenges, but getting the work done. Idus Masi. Thank you. This hearing is adjourned. It is 3:22 p.m.